So picture this. My two best friends, Megan and Chloe, decided I was suddenly persona non grata, right? Like they'd be whispering and giggling 2 feet away from me, making plans they conveniently forgot to include me in, all while acting like they were the world's most inseparable duo. They basically threw me out of the group for no reason other than pure nasty jealousy. It hurt like hell, seeing them buddy-buddy right there, deliberately showing me I was on the outside looking in. It was textbook mobbing, cloaked in the sickening pretense of still being friends. But guess what? Their perfect little friendship? It imploded, spectacularly. Turns out trying to renovate a dump of a house together when one is basically scamming the other for free labor isn't exactly a recipe for best friends forever. And yeah, watching that train wreck, knowing it was their own toxic crap coming back to bite them, let's just say I didn't shed a single tear. In fact, I might have even helped speed things along a little. We used to be a trio. That's what everyone called us. Clara, Megan, and Chloe. The inseparable three. From high school awkwardness, through college chaos, to navigating the choppy waters of our late 20s and early 30s, it felt like we were tethered together. Sleepovers turned into weekend trips, study sessions into wine nights, and shared dreams into mutual support systems. Or so I thought. Looking back now, maybe the cracks were always there, papered over by shared history and forced proximity. Megan, always the most outwardly confident, had a restless energy, a constant need for more attention, more money, more status. Chloe was the quieter one, incredibly talented with her hands. She could fix anything, build anything, make something beautiful out of nothing. I was just Clara, content in my career as a graphic designer, happy with my small apartment filled with books and art, building a life that felt peaceful and authentic to me. Maybe that was the problem. My contentment was perceived as complacency by Megan, and maybe, just maybe, my quiet happiness grated on their own unspoken dissatisfactions. The shift was insidious. It started subtly. A lunch invitation I heard about secondhand. A photo on social media of Megan and Chloe at a bar we always went to on Thursdays, a bar I hadn't been invited to that week. Inside jokes I didn't understand, punctuated by their shared laughter and quick glances that seemed to say, "Oh, you wouldn't get it." It was like being slowly erased from a photograph while still being forced to stand in the frame. I tried to brush it off at first. People get busy. Schedules clash. Maybe I had been a little preoccupied with a big project at work. I made excuses for them. But the instances piled up, a slow drip of exclusion that began to feel deliberate. They'd make plans right in front of me, talking about us, going to a concert or a weekend getaway. And then, when they caught my eye, they'd add a casual, "Oh, did we tell you?" It was a last-minute thing, or even worse, a condescending, "You wouldn't really be into that, would you, Clara?" The best friend act they put on for each other was the cruelest part. In my presence, they would amplify their bond. Exaggerated compliments. Shared secrets whispered just loud enough for me to see but not hear, finishing each other's sentences. It was a performance, designed to highlight my exclusion. Seeing them giggle together, lean into each other, share those knowing looks while I sat right there, feeling like an alien in my own friend group, was a specific kind of agony. It wasn't just being left out. It was being shown how left out I was, every single day. It was psychological warfare disguised as friendship. I remember one particularly painful evening. We were at a mutual friend's birthday party. Megan and Chloe arrived together, linked arm in arm, wearing matching outfits they must have planned without me. They worked the room like a unit, laughing loudly, drawing attention. Every time I tried to join their conversation, they'd politely acknowledge me for a second before turning back to each other, seamlessly continuing their inside jokes and shared stories. It was like I was a ghost they occasionally had to acknowledge out of politeness before returning to their real world. I spent the entire night feeling a lead weight in my stomach, smiling stiffly, pretending I wasn't being systematically erased. I left early, making up some excuse about being tired, the hot, prickly shame stinging my eyes. It was around this time that the whispers started reaching me through the grapevine of mutual friends. Comments Megan had made, little digs about my seemingly boring life, veiled criticisms of my choices. Chloe, quieter, was more subtle, but the constant pictures of them together, the exclusion from group texts that suddenly sprung up, spoke louder than words. The jealousy was palpable now, though they would never admit it. Maybe it was my lack of drama, my quiet happiness, my comfortable job that didn't involve chasing validation or external markers of success like Megan seemed to constantly do. Or maybe it was just that they had found something, or someone in each other that made me expendable. I tried to talk to them, of course. That was perhaps the biggest mistake. I pulled Megan aside first, choosing her because she was the more dominant one, the leader of their new two-person pack. I told her I felt left out, that things had changed, that it hurt seeing them so close while I was on the outside. She looked genuinely surprised for about half a second before her face hardened into a mask of practiced innocence. "Clara, what are you talking about? Nothing's changed. We love you. We're just, we've been spending a lot of time together lately, working on things." "Working on what?" I asked, my voice trembling slightly. "Oh, just stuff," she said, vaguely, waving a dismissive hand. "Girl stuff. You've been so busy with work, we didn't want to bother you." It was a pathetic excuse, a transparent lie, and we both knew it. It was gaslighting, pure and simple. My feelings were invalidated, my observations dismissed. I left that conversation feeling even worse, like I was crazy for seeing what was right in front of my face. Talking to Chloe yielded a similar result, albeit delivered with more hesitant awkwardness than Megan's dismissive ease. I don't know, Clara," she stammered, avoiding my gaze. Maybe we've just fallen into a routine. It's not intentional, I promise." But her eyes told a different story. They held guilt, yes, but also a strange new loyalty to Megan that superseded any long-standing bond with me. That was the breaking point. The pain of being excluded was immense, but the pain of being lied to, of having my reality denied, was soul-crushing. I stopped trying. I withdrew. The trio was officially, definitively broken. The silence that followed was deafening. My phone went quiet where their names used to pop up constantly. My social calendar, once filled with our shared plans, emptied out. It felt like a death in the family, a profound loss for which there was no funeral, no closure, just an aching void. Then, the house came into the picture. Megan, ever the ambitious, one announced she had bought a house. Not just a house, but a project. A sprawling, neglected Victorian that needed everything. New plumbing, electrical, roof, floors, walls, everything. It was a massive undertaking, one that seemed wildly out of reach for her on her own, even with the mortgage. But Megan had Chloe. Chloe, with her incredible skills, her willingness to work tirelessly, her unwavering loyalty that had now fully transferred from me to Megan. Megan presented it as a partnership. "Chloe's going to help me. It'll be our project, kinda." But it quickly became clear it wasn't a partnership in the equitable sense. Megan had the mortgage, the deed, the ultimate ownership. Chloe had the sweat equity. A lot of sweat equity. I heard about it through mutual friends, the same way I'd heard about the parties and trips I wasn't invited to. At first, it sounded exciting. A big project, a chance to build something beautiful. But as the months went on, the tone of the updates changed. "Megan's got Chloe working sunup to sundown over there," one friend mentioned casually. "Chloe says she's basically living on site." "Yeah, and Megan's mostly handling the design part. another added with a smirk. Meaning she picks out paint colors while Chloe rips up floorboards. The picture that emerged was one of severe imbalance. Chloe was pouring her considerable talent, time, and physical labor into renovating a house that would belong solely to Megan. What was Chloe getting out of it? "Oh, Megan said she'd pay her back when she sells," one friend relayed. Another said it was "for the price of friendship," a phrase that sent a chill down my spine, reminding me of the price I had paid for their version of friendship. Their toxicity, the very thing that had driven them to exclude me out of jealousy and insecurity, now began to fester within their own relationship, amplified by the stress and financial strain of the renovation. The subtle digs, the passive aggression, the power plays. I could almost hear them, even from a distance. Arguments became frequent, reported by mutual friends who were increasingly uncomfortable caught between them. Fights about money, budget overruns Megan hadn't planned for, materials Chloe needed that Megan was slow to buy. Fights about timelines, Megan's impatience clashing with the reality of structural repairs. Fights about effort, Chloe's exhaustion and resentment boiling over at Megan's perceived lack of hands-on help. Chloe had a meltdown the other day, a mutual friend told me wide-eyed. Said she felt like a free contractor, not a friend helping out. Said Megan acts like she's doing her a favor by letting her work on the house. The best friend's facade they had used to exclude me was crumbling. The jealousy that had poisoned their view of me was now infecting their view of each other. Megan resented Chloe's skills and the fact that she was indispensable to the project. Chloe resented Megan's ownership and the fact that her hard work was building Megan's asset, not her own. The house project, meant to solidify their bond, was tearing them apart. It was karma, plain and simple. Their own greed, entitlement, and inability to value someone else's contribution fairly were destroying the very friendship they had prioritized over mine. I watched from the sidelines, a detached observer. The initial pain of their betrayal had dulled, replaced by a complex mix of lingering hurt, grim satisfaction, and a strange sense of vindication. Seeing their unbreakable bond fracture over something as tangible as a house, something fueled by the same ugly traits they'd shown me, felt like a cosmic rebalancing. But just watching felt incomplete. Their actions against me had been deliberate, cruel in their subtlety. They had made me feel worthless, invisible, unwanted, all while performing their closeness right in front of my face. Karma was doing its work on them, yes, but I felt a growing conviction that they shouldn't just suffer the consequences of their own toxicity. They should also face consequences that directly related to the pain they had inflicted on me. Not petty revenge, but a form of justice, a nudge from the universe, or maybe just from me, to ensure the lessons were learned, or at least felt acutely. The legal aspect of their renovation troubles became my focus. I'd always been meticulous, a trait that served me well in design. I remembered snippets of conversations before they iced me out, details about the house, the kind of renovation they were planning. I started doing some discreet research, building codes, permit requirements, contractor laws, especially concerning unpaid labor or informal agreements. I wasn't looking to destroy them utterly, but to ensure the consequences of their actions were unavoidable, and perhaps slightly amplified in a way that mirrored their treatment of me. I found out they were cutting corners, big ones, skipping permits for major structural work, ignoring zoning regulations for some additions, relying on verbal agreements for Chloe's extensive labor instead of proper contracts. This was fertile ground. My revenge wasn't dramatic showdowns or public shaming, though their own arguments were doing plenty of that. It was quiet, strategic, and entirely deniable. An anonymous tip to the local building department about potential code violations at Megan's address. Just a simple online form. Submission. Easy to do. Impossible to trace back definitively. It would trigger an inspection, and with the amount of work they were doing without permits, that inspection was guaranteed to cause headaches, delays, and likely hefty fines and demands to redo work properly. More cost, more stress, more friction between Megan and Chloe. Another, more subtle move involved Chloe. I knew she was getting increasingly frustrated and resentful about the lack of payment and recognition. Through a carefully worded anonymous email sent to a general contact address I found online for a local legal aid service, I outlined a hypothetical situation strikingly similar to Chloe's. Someone doing extensive renovation work on a friend's property with only vague promises of future payment, the lack of contracts, the power imbalance. I framed it as a general query about labor rights and informal agreements. I didn't mention names, but I knew that if that query ever reached someone who specialized in construction law or small claims, they might recognize the potential for a significant legal issue for Chloe if she didn't protect herself or demand fair compensation. It was planting a seed, offering Chloe a path to potentially reclaim some of her effort, a path that would, inevitably, lead to a direct legal confrontation with Megan. I also, very occasionally, when the topic of Megan and Chloe's house drama came up organically among mutual acquaintances, would offer a carefully neutral, yet subtly pointed comment. Something like, "Oh, that house project? Sounds complicated, especially with all the regulations these days." Or, "I hope Chloe's being properly compensated for all her hard work. That kind of talent isn't cheap." Nothing accusatory, just enough to reinforce the narrative of difficulty and potential unfairness, ensuring the gossip mill kept churning, and the focus remained on the problematic nature of their collaboration. The result was exactly what I had anticipated, perhaps even more spectacular. The anonymous tip led to a stop work order, fines, and mandated inspections that uncovered a litany of violations. The project ground to a halt, costs skyrocketed, and the stress levels went through the roof. Megan was furious, blaming everyone but herself. Simultaneously, armed with the awareness potentially sparked by the anonymous legal aid query, or perhaps just reaching her breaking point, Chloe finally confronted Megan about payment, demanding a formal agreement or fair wages for the work already done. Megan, predictably, refused, claiming it was friendship, not a job, despite the thousands of hours Chloe had put in. This escalated into a full-blown legal dispute. Chloe, perhaps advised by legal aid or a lawyer she found, pursued a claim for the value of her labor. It was messy, public within our small circle, and incredibly damaging to both of them. Their social media, once filled with pictures of them, working side by side on the house, became battlegrounds of passive-aggressive posts and thinly veiled accusations. The friendship, the one they had so readily sacrificed mine for, was annihilated. The house, the symbol of Megan's ambition and Chloe's misused talent, became a monument to their failed bond and toxic dynamic. I heard they stopped speaking entirely after the legal mediation, or court case. I never got the exact details, but the outcome was clear. Chloe reportedly got some compensation, but nowhere near the full value of her work, a bitter pill to swallow. Megan was left with a partially renovated, legally tangled house and a lost friend. And me? I watched, and I healed. The pain didn't vanish overnight. But seeing the inevitable consequences of their actions unfold, seeing their own carefully constructed world implode, provided a necessary release. It wasn't just karma. It felt like balance. They had inflicted pain through calculated exclusion and deception, and the universe, with a little nudge from me, had delivered consequences rooted in their own deceit and unfairness. I stopped dwelling on the why of their initial betrayal. It didn't matter anymore. Their jealousy, their insecurity, their inability to be genuinely happy for someone else. Those were their issues, not mine. The house project just exposed the rot at the core of their relationship. I focused on rebuilding my own life. I invested more time in my existing, healthier friendships, the ones built on mutual respect and genuine affection. I explored new hobbies, took a solo trip I'd always dreamed of, threw myself into my work with renewed energy. I learned to trust my own judgment again, To not let someone else's insecurities dictate my worth. Years have passed now. I've heard snippets. Megan eventually finished the house and sold it, but reportedly for less than she'd hoped, perhaps due to the delays and legal issues. Chloe moved away, started her own small business doing custom carpentry and renovations, finally getting paid what she was worth. They never reconciled. The trio is a distant memory, a chapter closed. Sometimes I think about that time. The pain of being deliberately excluded. The sting of seeing them act like best friends while treating me like an afterthought. It still smarts a little. A faint scar. But then I think about the house, the arguments, the legal mess, the bitter end of their own friendship. And I think about my own life now. Peaceful, fulfilling, surrounded by people who genuinely care about me. And I know that sometimes the most satisfying revenge isn't a dramatic confrontation, but quiet, strategic action combined with living your best life. Their toxicity consumed them, just like it almost consumed me. But I got out, and in the end, I got to watch their self-made prison collapse, brick by painstaking brick. And yeah, a part of me helped lay the groundwork for that collapse, and I don't regret it for a second.